The rock around us pulsed, dull red veins of melt flickering like the heartbeat of a buried god. I pressed my gloved palm to the tunnel wall and felt the distant rumble of magma rivers, a shiver traveling through 12 kilometers of basalt. We were almost ready. Rakim's voice crackled in my helmet. Lyra, Junction 17 is open. Flow rates holding at 93%. Your side? 17A stable, I answered, and unclamped a thermal probe from my belt. The probe hissed as I drove it into the wall. Numbers bloomed across my visor. 2046 Dugsinoi. Good. Hot enough to stay liquid. Cool enough to keep the vent from collapsing before firing. Rakim's breathing slowed on the channel. He was relieved too. For 4 years, the tunneler core had crawled through Erebus's mantle, carving helical shafts and electromagnetic guide rails into a planet no star dared claim. Shut out by starlight, we'd embrace the dark. And now the dark would shoot back. I switched to the command channel. Ops, this is core team. The magnetic liner for Barrel 9 is charged. Prep sequence at your discretion. Across the fractured planet, voices chimed to acknowledge. Somewhere closer to the surface, Colonel Ibarra would be pacing the shielded ops chamber with her famous silent fury, watching as 53 magma barrels prepared to do what no fortress gun had ever attempted. Hurl the planet's own blood across interplanetary space. I looked down the tunnel. It was larger than any cathedral the old Earth had boasted, a geode of cyclopean dimensions. Along its length, superconducting coils glistened, spiderwebbed with coolant frosting that steamed in the lava-warmed air. The barrels converged toward a single exit wound, a vent bored straight through the crust. On the far side of the rogue planet, 52 sibling vents mirrored ours, each aligned with brutal precision toward a narrow point of light on the sensors. The Azurine Ring, seat of the Dominion. That glittering loop of habitats, once humanity's Eden, had exiled us to this frigid wanderer. They'd harnessed the star quarter for themselves and pushed every dissenter beyond its gravity well. Go carve out a grave in the dark, they'd said. Just don't come back. We intended to come back, not with colonies or shuttles or petitions, with fire. Rakim detached the probe, and the wall wept droplets that hissed on his boots. You ever think about what the slugs look like once they're in space? He asked. All that molten iron, flash freezing into shards. It'll be like bottle glass, only 45 million tons each. I shrugged. I'll think about it when they're hitting something that deserves the thinking. He laughed, but there was a tremor in it. He wasn't alone. Every tunneler felt the presence of the ring in our dreams, that impossible ribbon of silver around a captive star, bright enough that even Erebus's ancient night couldn't blot it from our telescopes. We were the forgotten children, freezing in the outer dark, cheeks pressed to the window pane, while the Dominion feasted in the warmth. A chime pinged. The countdown appeared on my HUD. 900 seconds. Colonel wants all core teams evacuated to the hard casing lift, Ops barked. State of readiness, Omega Red. Clear the firing line. Rakim and I exchanged a glance. Lift to the crust meant safety. If anything about this plan could be called safe. Half the model runs predicted Erebus would survive the recoil. Half showed it shearing along the barrel axes like a cracked egg. We carried explosive bolts on our exosuits in case we needed to sever ourselves from a collapsing tunnel. There was no plan for when the entire mantle inverted. I wasn't convinced any bolt could save us from that. We started the long sprint along the spiral walkway, magnetic boots alternating between clang and hiss where ice met iron. Behind us, servo arms sealed hatches, and hydraulic rams belched argon to purge oxygen pockets. Even stone could burn if you were careless enough. Lyra, Rakim said between breaths, I've got a bad loop in my head. What if the ring's antimatter batteries deflect the first volley? A second volley follows 90 seconds later, I reminded him. And if they deflect that? Third volley's bigger, I said. And if they still have batteries left, we keep firing until we're out of magma or planet. He nodded, but I could tell the math wasn't where his fear rooted. Firing until we were out of planet was not a metaphor. In the 6th month of excavation, we'd already pierced a pressurized pocket that cost 23 lives. Since then, we'd made peace with a simple truth. We were bullets in our own gun. The lift chamber loomed, a bulbous cyst braced by adamant struts against the crushing heat. I climbed the loading ramp. Threw Rakim a tether line, and we locked in. Other teams crowded around us, faces streaked with soot and sweat. Some murmured prayers, some recited firing sequences under their breath, like mantras. The countdown hit 300. A bass hum reverberated through the chamber. The mag coils were energizing, knitting a corridor of ferocious fields through 53 converging barrels. Each coil needed power rivaling a small moon's net output. We had pilfered that power from the cosmos, mining rogue hydrogen between stars, feeding it to fusion torches hidden in Erebus's canyons. The Dominion never saw the glimmer. Their telescopes were tuned for threats basking under suns, not in the unloved interstices. The lift jerked upward through the shaft, magnetics biting the rails. I watched numbers scroll. Even racing at 80 meters per second, ascent would take almost 10 minutes. We'd clear the mantle, maybe reach the crustal bunkers before recoil. Ping. 200 seconds. The comms board flashed with private hail. I accepted. Colonel Ibarra's scarred face filled a corner of my visor. Chief Engineer Vance, she said, voice crisp. You and your partner remain at Intermediate Station 32. Divert lift. I frowned. 32 sits inside the cone of pressure. Orders were for full evac. Change of plan, she said. Diagnostics show an entanglement fault in Barrel 9's final armature. Your barrel, your responsibility. Rakim leaned close to hear. His eyes widened. If we stop the climb here, we'll never outrun the recoil, I protested. Fault must be cleared, Ibarra replied. If 9 misfires, the spread arc widens. We lose accuracy, we lose payload energy. The ring may survive. You have 140 seconds. The channel cut. She didn't wait for argument. Rakim exhaled, long and thin. Tell me we've got a workaround. Maybe, I said, tapping commands. The lift slowed, then braked against the siding. The doors irised, revealing an umber-glow corridor that seethed with eddies of vaporized rock. We were close to the molten arteries now. I smelled metallic cinnamon, the scent of iron vapor and ozone. Only 2 suits stepped off. The other tunnelers watched us silently as the doors shut and the cab hurtled on. None of them offered a goodbye. Time for kindness had burned out months ago. We started down the corridor at a jog. The mag boots stuck hard. Heat buckled steel plates beneath the thermal screen, making the floor uneven. Alarms wailed overhead, warning of soon-to-be lethal conditions. I scanned the fault report. Barrel 9's armature coil had desynced from quantum lock, drifting microseconds out of phase with the master lattice. At the velocities we were about to unleash, microseconds translated to kilometers of targeting error. The ring spanned a world's circumference, but our slugs must strike a critical splice node no larger than a city to trigger chain failure. Manual resync? Rakim asked. For that, we'd need to access the harmonic uplink at the coil throat. He stared down the corridor, realization sinking in. The uplink sat inside a maintenance alcove just 20 meters downstream of the molten slug. When the firing sequence engaged, the alcove would become a shaft of plasma hotter than any furnace on Earth ever birthed. No shielding could save whoever was still inside. We ran anyway. Ping. 120 seconds. The alcove was a pit carved into the coil assembly, walls rippling with flowing electrum coolant. At its heart, a crystalline node pulsed out of step with the rhythmic glow of the main coil, like a heart arrhythmia in metal. Rakim slashed open a junction port. Quantum anchors jittering. Reset needs dual key confirmation. Of course it did. Dominion engineers built fail-safes into the original coil designs decades before Erebus went rogue, paranoid of sabotage. They never imagined those features would haunt their exiles today. On 3, I said, planting my glove on the first key plate. Rakim mirrored me across the node. Our suit chronos synced. 3. Key plates flashed. A spear of silvery light hammered through the corridor, the initial alignment pulse. The planet had begun its exhale. Astronomers on the ring, if they were watching, would see Erebus's night side bloom with 53 newborn volcanoes. They would not yet know that each volcanic column was magnetically fenced, shaping a barrel rather than a cloud. They would understand soon. We yanked our keys. The node's heartbeat snapped into phase, fluorescent lines racing around the coil rings as the armature accepted command. Desync cleared, Rakim announced. Ops did not reply. Every ear topside was listening to the planet's roar, praying math and geology cooperated. Ping. 60 seconds. A tremor knocked us against the alcove wall. Chunks of still solid lithosphere peeled. Slag poured down the tunnel. In our suit displays, stress gauges screamed red. Rakim looked at me. Lifts a kilometer up shaft. Never make it. Emergency egress, I asked, though I knew the map. Station 32 possessed a micro-shuttle dock used for cargo inserts, sealed on the planet's nightside slope not far above us. It wasn't rated for core launch pressure, but it was outside the direct line of the slug's throat. Better odds than here. We ran again, boots splashing through newborn rivulets of melt. The corridor canted 20 degrees. The whole barrel was flexing under electromagnetic torque. Ahead, a blast door levered halfway shut. Auto seal in progress. Rakim dived, slid under with millimeters to spare, and braced it while I crawled through. It clanged as it sealed behind us, isolating us from the barrel. The shuttle bay lay in darkness, but for emergency strobes. A stubby cone craft sat on its cradle, hull frosting under cryogenic venting. We clambered up the access ladder, triggering the hatch override. Ping. 30 seconds. Inside, we strapped into opposite couches. The shuttle's engines were cold. We had no time to start them. I switched propulsion off. We'd fire the launch rails instead. A magnetic shove intended for cargo pods, not people. But it would throw us out of the bay into Erebus's pallid atmosphere. If you could call a haze of nitrogen slush atmosphere, I keyed the release. Ready? Rakim managed a grin. Been ready since they kicked us off the ring. The rails thumped. The shuttle lurched, scraping ice as it catapulted into a chute angled toward the surface. We shot upward, weightless as the cradle fell away. Below, Erebus bellowed like a wounded leviathan. Ping. 0. Light. Blinding, searing light erupted along the horizon line behind us. And then there was no horizon. Only a plume of incandescent magma forced through a barrel 30 kilometers long and funneled by magnetic walls that squeezed it, the way rifling grasps a bullet. The projectile, if you could still call it that, was molten iron, denser than hope, accelerated to 58 kilometers per second. The recoil hit next. The shuttle spun, inertia dampers squealing. I glimpsed the vent mouth bloom wider, ejecting atmospheric shock waves that shredded nearby ridges into particulate mist. But the barrel held. The superconducting lattice glowed cherry red, yet did not fail. A second later, 52 more lances speared heaven, a bouquet of planetary wrath. We cleared the crust, riding ballistic momentum. The shuttle's hull rattled, microfissures creeping where the pressure gradient stressed the frame. I ignored them, eyes locked on the external scope feed. Space unfolded like a velvet curtain. Behind us, Erebus looked wrong, hemisphere bright with eruptive scars, the rest blacker than sin. Ahead, the star Corda gleamed, its light a distant candle, and around it, thin and silvery, the ring. My comm pinged. Colonel Ibarra's tone was ragged. Payloads away. Telemetry nominal. Impact window. 5 hours. 5 hours. If we lived that long, we might even witness it. Rakim floated toward the aft panel, legs shaky in half G. Reaction wheels crippled, he muttered. Gyros offline, but our vector's clean. I exhaled. Could be worse, he laughed softly. Could always be worse. We set about patching the hull, sealing cracks with polymer foam, rerouting oxygen. Only once the immediate crisis dimmed did silence seep in. The shuttle, designed for cargo hops, lacked long-range comms. Ops could talk to us only as long as Erebus's scant relay towers survived. An hour later, they didn't. The channel went to static. We folded ourselves near a viewport, watching Erebus shrink to a marble veined with fire. Parts of the southern hemisphere glowed dangerously bright. Secondary quakes, maybe magma floodplains. Whether the planet would hold together after successive volleys, unknown. We had fired 6 times by the time we lost signal. Each volley staggered 90 seconds apart, each slug scorching a path sunward. The recoil wobbled Erebus's spin and nudged its orbit, but no fractures big enough to kill it. Yet. Rakim dozed, face tranquil in 0G. I envied him. When my eyes shut, I saw the ring. That shining covenant of our enemies had been my home once. before the purge tribunals exiled anyone who questioned genetic quotas. My mother still lived there, or so I'd heard. She had chosen silence rather than share exile. Through the scope, the ring was just a curved glimmer, fragile as wire. Our slugs would cross the gulf at meteoric speed, but space is wide. For hours, doubt gnawed. Had we calculated inertial drift correctly? Would Corda's solar wind shear the molten glass into harmless spray? Would the Dominion's defense grid vaporize each shard with antimatter sputters? At T-minus 2 hours, the scope picked up counterflares. Bright pinpricks blooming along the ring's circumference, interceptor launches. "They're awake," Rakim said softly. The interceptors move fast, but the magma slugs were faster. No engine can outrun a planet's worth of electromagnetics. We watched as one interceptor, a flechette of bright cobalt, crossed paths with the lead slug. Sensors flashed white. The interceptor vanished. The slug, maybe sloughed of a few tons, continued. The Dominion tried lasers next. Beams pricked the dark. Against solid slugs, they might have carved gouges. Against molten ones, the beams only churned the surface. Ablating droplets that froze into needle storms, heading the same direction. The ring's own defenses became shrapnel multipliers. An hour 46 minutes after launch, the first slug struck. There was no single explosion. The ring was too large, tensioned against its star's gravity like a bowstring. Our slug punched through the habitat wall where Segment 19 met Segment 20, a district of hydroponic towers. For 90 seconds, the impact looked localized, a bulging blister of incandescence, gas fountaining into vacuum. Then the structural load redistributed, metal screamed, and the segment seam shredded. 500,000 tons of habitat tore free, spinning debris into Corda's glare. I felt the vibration of my own shout rather than heard it. Rakim whooped beside me. Slug 2 arrived 40 kilometers further around the curve. Slug 3, 4, 5 hammered chain reactions along the orbital artery. The ring's rotation faltered, wobbling like a top struck sideways. Once that perfect balance was gone, gravitational and centrifugal forces quarreled, shredding support trusses. Segments folded inward, others flung outward into elliptical escape. Within 20 minutes, what had been the Dominion's crown was an expanding gyre of ruin. Rakim's grin faded as he stared. "There were children there," he murmured. I closed my eyes. There were children on the 8th Exodus convoy they spaced. Silence settled. The shuttle's cabin lights dimmed on low power cycle. Outside, particles of glassy slag whispered against the hull. Meteoroids born from Erebus's heart, returning to kiss us on their endless journey. Hours later, the ring still glowed with molten scars, pieces drifting in solar orbit. Corda burned on, indifferent. We rotated the shuttle, panning sensors back toward Erebus. The planet was quieter now, its vents cooling to dull crimson. No new launches rose. The power grids must have failed, or perhaps Colonel Ibarra decided enough was enough. Either way, the gun lay spent. "Think they survived?" Rakim asked. I thought of the colonel, of the tunnelers who made it to crustal bunkers, of those who didn't clear the shafts. "Some," I said. "The planet's still there. It'll cool, seal its wounds, might even grow a new ice crust. And us?" He gestured at the cramped cabin. "Supplies for 3 days, oxygen for 2. I smiled. "We're bullets that missed the target. Now we keep flying." He snorted. "Philosophers will argue whether that's failure or freedom. Let them." I reached for the nav controls. With the ring destroyed, Corda's trade lanes lay in chaos. Somewhere amid that chaos, a salvage tug might notice our signal, or we might aim for a distant Lagrange point and trust the universe to send us another rogue planet in need of tunnelers. I powered the beacon, set it to pulse. For a moment, I let myself imagine the Dominion survivors tuning their receivers, hearing the faint heartbeat of a shuttle launched from Erebus, realizing none of their exiles would ever bow again. Through the viewport, I watched molten ghosts drift between stars, carving silent arcs across eternity. We had turned a planet into a gun and fired our anger across the void. The shot had landed. Whatever came next would be written in the slow grammar of ashes and seedlings. Rakim floated beside me, shoulder warm against mine. Lyra, he said, voice small in the vast dark, do you think we'll find a place that doesn't need guns? I gazed at the embers of a dismantled paradise and answered honestly, not yet, but we just made the universe a little emptier of tyrants. That's a start. The shuttle coasted on, two specks of stubborn life orbiting a dying dream, carrying with us the warmth of a planet's core and the hope that, someday, we'd finally learn to shape fire into something other than a weapon.